and welcome to Street Shaman Productions. I've been making a couple of videos and they've been doing really well. They're all tutorials on EDM music and basic techniques. So make sure you go check those other videos out. One of the comments on the videos was to make a tutorial entirely on Vital, which I think is a great idea. But I didn't want to do that just yet. I want to pay homage to a way that I learned how to do sound design, which is through this textbook. Creating sounds from scratch. This is a textbook that they teach at Berkeley and Oxford. Basically, if you want to be part of a music college and you want to learn, have a degree in music synthesis, they would have classes and this would be the textbook that they give you. You can buy these on Amazon. I encourage you to go do so. There was a couple of them that were out of my price range at the moment. I wanted to have a hardbook copy of it so I can have an official, textbook. Nonetheless, this is something that they teach in college. Well, I was trying to learn how to do music. I actually wanted to go to college, but they were wanting $80,000 a year, and that is too much out of my price range. I just asked myself, so how do I get this good while still getting an education? I got myself equipment. I got myself Ableton. I came across some problems, which was mixing and this and that, and that's when I was like, man, I feel like I need a degree. I feel like I need to be surrounded by like-minded people. But at the same time, I never really liked college. I never really liked it. There's too many opinions, too many people. It's not my thing. I just grabbed the learning materials from it. And I really like this book. It goes through a lot about sound design, but the most important part that I got from this book is that it did teach about the history of sound design. And when somebody asked me about the Vital tutorial, I honestly was in my bedroom about to fall asleep, and I was asking ChatGPT, what's the history of this? Because I try to look it up online. You can't really find it, but I did find it in this book. And in this book, it talked over several topics about the history of music production and music synthesis that I feel like needs to be talked about. I looked on YouTube. There's no videos on it. There is some, but for film, not for music entirely. So this video is gonna be entirely dedicated to the history of music synthesis. I will have some other tutorials out, but I just wanted to pay a lot of homage. Fair warning, this is not about music production. This is very nerdy stuff. We're gonna get in depth into this. Not too much. We're gonna try to have fun, and I'm gonna try it as quick as possible. Depth of the history of this is very vast, but I'm gonna keep it short and simple to where you can actually, if you wanted to go deeper, I'll give you some certain talking points that you can look up yourself. All right, let's get into the video. We're gonna start our history down to the first person who ever transferred audio from one place to another, the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell, he invented a telephone. He managed to create an invention that transferred voice all the way to the other side of the country. Whenever he created this device, it exploded to where everybody wanted a telephone. You could save time. You didn't have to travel all across the country just to go talk to someone. After Alexander Graham Bell invented a telephone, then came Thomas Edison, who invented a phonograph where we could actually record audio. Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. Now everybody could record audio. This was amazing. The first step. After that, Thomas Edison realized, wow, let's get electric to people. Let's everybody get electric to people. And there's Tesla. Tesla innovated a lot of that stuff too. Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell started laying down grid work for electricity. In order to have electricity, you need to have capabilities of handling electricity, such as diodes. Diodes at the time were very prehistoric. They would burn out all the time, just like light bulbs. As the need for electricity grew, we needed new ways to handle electricity. Then came the vacuum tube. There are two types of vacuum tubes. There are other ones, but here we're gonna focus on these two. The diode and the triode. Diode allows electricity to only go through one way. It cannot go through the other way. Triode is a type of vacuum tube where there is a connection from the bottom and the connection to the top, and in the middle there's an electronic switch. If you get this electricity, it allows it to pass. This grew electricity all across America, and everybody was using vacuum tubes. People started utilizing vacuum tubes all across electricity, and even some engineers who made the first computer. You know the computer that's on your thing over there? They actually made a computer straight out of diodes and triodes. Believe it or not. Basically, that's what your computer's doing. It's a lot fancier, it's a lot more compact. Basically, that's what your computer's doing. It's just letting things happen, and those are your ones and zeros. Charles Babbage and Alan Turing. They are the first ones to develop the first computer and actually didn't finish building until 1991. They had a theory, if they used a series of triodes and diodes in a certain way, you could actually utilize them to do math, perform algorithms, sounds, people started opening their minds of what the capabilities of vacuum tubes could do. This opened everybody's concept of thinking whenever it came to diodes and triodes and vacuum tubes. As soon as we opened our mind and realized that diodes and triodes could actually be used in crazy ways like this, we actually realized that we could actually do this through sound. We're gonna go back to Alexander Graham Bell, which he created the first loudspeaker. I feel like I just jumped or something, I guess. Through this, we started needing audio for different things. One of the things that we needed it for was for radios and wartime transmissions. Speakers and radios were essential, revolutionizing audio. It was during the Industrial Revolution, I believe. I don't want to look it up right now. I believe that's one of the biggest booms of radio. I'm not gonna get into how a radio works. It's very simple, but it's very complicated for someone who doesn't really know. Don't worry about it. So everybody was excited about electricity, and people started making electric organs, guitars, and this is still like the 1900s. People were experimenting with it. Then finally came the first synthesizer type instrument, the theremin. Leon Theremin patented the theremin in 1928. The history of the theremin is actually very interesting. There was famous musicians on there trying it out, trying new things, and I believe there was people listening to it and they were literally crying because of how beautiful it sounded and how unique it sounded. They played some old music. Here's one of the clips right here. So after the success of the theremin, people started thinking of making musical instruments with it, a little bit more unique and very different. Now I'm gonna backtrack a little bit, but this is part of the middle of the history of the FFT. This is the fast Fourier transform. The FFT was really thought of in 1805 and then was officially published and actually proven as much as it could. It's still a theory in 1965. Fast Fourier transforms are interesting because that's what we use whenever we go look up an EQ on Ableton. It shows the frequencies all across the board. It shows the Lewis one all the way there. Carl Friedrich Gauss, he had a theory that all sounds were built on tonal frequencies starting from 1, and then you go through the harmonics and you can do so. So if you look through Serum, you'll see that little display down there and it has the little bars down there. If you go up on 1, that's the fundamental frequency, and then all the little bins after that are the harmonics of it. Below there are the individual phases. Basically, it just means that every waveform out there can be compromised and broken down in individual sine waves. And I think this is around where scientists really started practically using this and started using it in their advancements, because in order to start handling some serious audio issues, you had to do a lot of mathematics, and I think the FFT was starting to be used very much at this point. So after the theremin and also the realization of the FFT, people started creating their own electronic instruments. I'm gonna list some right here. The telharmonium, developed by Thaddeus Cahill. It's one of the earliest ones. It's using rotating tone wheels. Trautonium, electronic sackboot. I'm sure that's the right way to say it. I'm pretty sure it's German. I don't think anybody would call something sackboot unless it was German or Russian. Now, we're gonna get to one of the most important inventions, but I do want to mention one thing real quick. There is a school dedicated towards audio, and actually it started turning towards music synthesis, and I believe this is the foundation, and this is where people started realizing the capabilities of electronic music. It was the Columbia Princeton Music Center. It was a collaboration between 3 different colleges, I think. The most massive and the most innovative thing I have to talk about is the RCA Mark II sound synthesizer. This thing was fucking huge. It is the size of a Walmart. It is a modular synthesizer, but it was very barbaric compared to what our synthesizers can do today. But that was the first, I think, one of the first really important inventions. They created this thing with a couple composers. One of the most important one was Vladimir Ussachevsky, which was a composer, and Otto Luenig, I think I'm saying that right, another composer. Basically, these guys figured out how to do electronic music all the way from the start. They were doing oscillators, they were figuring out different waveforms, and they were actually not even just participating in the science of it. They were actually experimenting with the science of music, the science of audio. They were experimenting with the science of audio and putting them into music. Isn't that amazing? These people spent hours. They were known for staying up all night and just really just tweaking with sounds. That's all they did. And people thought they were weird. He'd turn it down, go, and people thought they were crazy, man. These people were the innovators, though. With the two composers that were there were actually some legitimately good works. At the time, I think it was very experimental and listeners really couldn't appreciate what it was, but people did understand that this was completely new. We're gonna listen to a couple clips of those right now. Yes, that is very weird, but you can hear the ring mod. They really like the ring mod in there. And this was the first part of where they really started developing, honing, and simplifying the envelope and the LFO. Top right of vital and the bottom left of zero. To attack, decay, sustain, and release, ADSR. They were the first ones to really use it in the way that they could. I believe this really inspired Robert Moog to make his own synthesizer, the Moog synthesizer. The Moog synthesizer was revolutionary because at the time they didn't really have the simplicity of sound design into such a box. I think before you really had to know your DSP capabilities, digital signal processing. You really had to know how that thing worked in order to work it. With the Moog, it really simplified and basically imagine a program with a beautiful UI. That's basically what the Moog was. Moog came out during the 60s and it really blew off with psychedelic rock music itself, because you hear the Beach Boys and stuff like that. Although through the use of the beautiful Moog synthesizer, it only was capable through mono. Mono means one note played at a time, and that was the limitations of the Moog. In 1972, came out with the ARP Odyssey. It was the first duo synthesizer. Basically it had duo capabilities, which means it could play two notes at a time. After this, John Chowning first publishes his paper on FM capabilities. John Chowning first published his paper in the capability of FM synthesis. His paper talked about how through this FFT, like I mentioned earlier, he could actually do mathematically some great things in order to recreate sounds such as bells, guitars, clarinets. And it was really interesting because you could pick different algorithms and you could do this, but it really wasn't simplified quite yet. After that, they made the first polyphonic, which mainly means that they could do more than two, which encouraged Moog to do a poly synthesizer, which was the Poly Moog. After that, there was a lot of innovations, a lot of new synthesizers that came out, and the one that's most important, I believe, is the Yamaha DX7. The Yamaha DX7 was not the first, but it was the most important FM synthesizer out there. About the 1980s, people really started leaning towards the synthesizer, and there's real big innovations, new synthesizers, new things coming out, new capabilities, and then there came the need for more capabilities on these synthesizers. Someone developed MIDI. MIDI is the electronic data sequence for your keyboard. So if you got a keyboard and you press a note, there's a velocity rating of 1 through 127. MIDI is a whole nother thing. It's a whole science, and it's a whole it's actually like a programming language. And this is whenever MIDI started getting a little bit more digital, less analog, but still did the same thing. People started realizing the importance of computers and started using computers in everyday life just to send emails and stuff like that. I may be wrong here. I believe you could send emails. It was just very barbaric at the time. Like send messages and stuff. Electronic mail is what I mean. You could type up memos and stuff like that. Computers started really growing and start really just exploding at the time. It was a very slow start, but it was the start of it. In order for computers to work, they had to have memory capabilities. And one of the most important things about memory capabilities that we need to know is that sample-based synthesis needs memory. Then came the mellotron. Basically, you can press the key, and the lower you go on the keys, the lower the sound, and the higher you go, the higher the sound. And it created like a whole new world. Sample-based synthesizers were featured on Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is a picture down below. So now we have oscillator-based synthesizers. We got FM-based synthesizers. We have sample-based synthesizers. We have like these crazy things going on here, and people are actually starting to experiment and starting to realize, hey, maybe emulating a sound or trying to recreate the sound isn't the best thing that we should do. We should start getting really experimental. And people realize you could actually create unique and very creative sounds just with these synthesizers by itself. You don't need to recreate anything. And the first people to do this were Kraftwerk. Kraftwerk was an electronic band formed in Germany. These guys have live shows. Everybody's over there just like drawing their jaw. They're like, whoa. It was something completely different, and this is what innovated the start of techno and electronic music. These guys really popularized it. After that, Korg started getting into the game by dropping the M1. M1 had a lot of instruments pre-banked on there. Basically, you could just produce off of your keyboard. You don't really need too much. This is where the 1990s house electronic dance started really becoming popular with the Korg M1, along with other synthesizers. After popularization of electronic music and computers started coming together, there was now capabilities of wavetables. Wolfgang Palm released the PPG Wave series. Basically, it was a synthesizer that could do multiple waveforms. So before waveforms on the Korg, you could dial it in, and that was technically a wavetable, but now you can create your own wavetable by taking a sample and running the table like that. But it really wasn't that popularized because it was only capable of 8-bit because of the limitations of the computers at the time. So it did sound really raunchy sometimes, but some people did like it. But that's the first step that we took towards wavetable synthesis. In 1992, they created eMagic Logic for Atari and Macintosh. This is the first digital audio workstation. You can actually now produce music on the computer, and there are other comparators such as Fairlight, which gets used on DaVinci, which I'm going to use to edit this video. And then in 2002, Apple buys eMagic Pro and turns it into Logic Pro. Now all this stuff is really great. Now we're doing music on the computer. The revolution of the computer started growing, and I feel like I'm gonna stop it here, but there are important moments of DAW innovations that we did. There was a lot of them, but things are happening so fast. I feel like we don't know what's the most important thing that happened until some time has passed, because now we're getting less than 20 years ago. I think the most important one since then was VST capabilities, and then Serum. Serum was the boss. After Serum, everybody started realizing VSTs could be a whole new thing. VST3 comes out, and then now that's where we are today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be doing a breakdown of complete music synthesis after this, how to do FM, sound design, sample-based synthesis, subtractive synthesis, a lot of different stuff that this textbook goes over. And so I can simplify some of the lessons for you, so then you're not overwhelmed by what I'm doing. Obviously, I am just turning dials on stuff, but there is actually a science and terminology, a common terminology for this type of sound design. So give it a like, give it a comment. If you thought this was interesting, let me know. I wanted to dive deeper into a lot of different stuff, but I don't have enough time. I haven't seen a video like this, so I'm gonna try my best to get this video out there and do the best that I can. Thank you guys.